morning and or late afternoon. Today is Wednesday, the 5th of January, 2022. I'm Brach Jennings.
And I'm Peter Clark.
And this is Intercontinental Media.
That's right.
And oh, Peter, has it been a few days for me?
Yeah, I know. It's crazy.
Well, you listeners, you may see that I'm situated somewhere different than I was in our first episode, revealing a little bit of my other life. Behind me here is Karl Barth's Magisterial Church Dogmatics. But I am on the other side of my room today because, Peter, as you know, I have no computer. He just shakes his head at me. Well, on the 1st of January, yes, our episode had been done and everything was fine with that. But in the evening, I was speaking to a friend per Zoom, and I knocked 2/3 of a glass of water all over my MacBook. I ruined my MacBook, and thus had no idea what I was going to do. Everything for my schoolwork was fine, by the way. iCloud is really a godsend. I never thought that until this last weekend, but it was like, Happy New Year to me, bye-bye computer. But wonderfully, through the generosity of friends and former teachers and mentors on Facebook, I was able to raise more than enough money for a refurbished in a quality level Lenovo ThinkPad. It should be here tomorrow. But we're not recording tomorrow, are we, Peter? We are recording today.
That is correct.
Yes, we cannot leap into the future. I know we both like media related things and as an auxiliary topic to that, technology. But the computer won't be here till tomorrow, so I am doing this on my iPad. And of course, you know, I had to plug the iPad in. So I am sitting in my lovely reading chair with Karl Barth's shadow somehow over me. There are far worse things, in my opinion, than that.
Yes. Oh man.
So, and Peter contributed to my new computer. So many thanks to you.
Yes.
It was devastating.
I know. Well, it always is when you lose a computer.
Have you ever done that before? Have you knocked water onto your computer? I'm gonna drink water, by the way, while we're talking.
Right.
Hope I don't knock it on the iPad.
Not that much water. I've never wrecked a computer with water. I've dropped an iPhone in water.
Oh, how'd that go?
Well, the first time I did it, it did not go well because it was before it was water resistant days. The second time, I went in the water with the iPhone. Because I fell out of a boat. But it was okay, it was fine.
Oh my God, I remember that. You posted that video to Facebook.
I did. Yep.
That was just recently. That was just a couple of years ago. I think I'd already moved to Germany.
Yeah, it was a couple of years ago.
Well, anyway, now that we have kvetched a bit for our listeners, shall we proceed to the matter at hand, Peter?
Let's.
Well, I'm going to let you take the lead a little bit this time, if that's all right with you.
That's fine.
Wonderful, because given my catastrophe, I do not have my lovely notes that I had last time. I did look at the film, and I did, of course, I've seen Halloween much more recently than Nightmare. I'd seen it just a month ago or something, so it wasn't the real needed refresh. But yeah, I don't have my notes. So I will rely on you to take the lead in light of the exceptional circumstances of today, but I am fully ready to jump in with you.
Yeah. So couple things. First off, I think there are a few key elements of Halloween that you have to talk about. First off is the lack of blood. There's no blood in Halloween. Absolutely none.
There's a little bit on Michael's knife after he stabs his sister, but do you mean there's no gushing blood?
I don't think there's even blood on his knife after he stabs his sister.
Oh, I saw a little bit because I looked for it. It's very faint, very subtle.
Yeah, it's more like a rust mark really than blood. But it's
okay.
But there's no blood in the movie. And that's on purpose. It's they didn't want the gore to distract from the storytelling. So that's one thing. Another thing is that Michael Myers is silent. I mean, you hear him breathe, but he never talks. He never verbally engages with anything. He's just this silent boogeyman. And finally, I think when we were talking some about this, about Nightmare on Elm Street, the camera is so much more alive in Halloween. Right? The first shot of the movie is from Michael Myers' perspective, young Michael Myers. So we even get to see the mask come on over the camera.
And that's a one-take shot for 5 minutes.
Yeah, it is. It's really
maybe even more than 5 minutes. Actually, did you time it? I didn't time it.
I didn't time it. No, but it's a one-take shot, all from young Michael Myers' perspective. And throughout the movie, we get shots from different characters' perspectives. And the camera moves around and feels much more alive. If you're watching right now, Brach would be much more like the camera work on Halloween, whereas I would be much more like the camera work on Nightmare on Elm Street.
There, happy now, Peter. It's I can't help it. You know, I can't hold my iPad still.
It's fine. It's fine.
I just want to show off my bookshelf. Is really the one of my bookshelves is the thing. I said we weren't doing something Block Part 2, so I'm not gonna tell our listeners what else is on this shelf.
That's right.
See our previous Stumbling Block episodes if you're interested in the contents of that particular bookshelf.
Yep.
But okay, yeah, you're right. And you know what, Peter, I was hoping you were going to bring up the camera, because as I looked at this again, of course, I had to look at it on my iPad. I don't know if you ever have you ever watched a movie on an iPad?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that was a very interesting experience for me, because it put me like right up, like my hand gesture is really not effective, but it put me right up into the into the story. And then I have just my Sennheiser earbuds, which I'm using that, I wanted a decent pair of earbuds and I couldn't afford what I really wanted, which were a pair of audiophile leather Grados. So, stuck with my Sennheisers, but at least they're good.
Oh,
and so I at the movie, and it was HD. It was on Amazon Prime. Yep. And I did notice how much more attuned to the camera I was this time than with Nightmare. So I would say, but you're the expert, so I'm going to ask you then if you can at least track my argument.
Yeah.
I would say in Nightmare, it is the acting out of the script that is the main source of storytelling. And in Halloween, it is the camera that drives the storytelling. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. The camera is the storyteller. The camera is the narrator in Halloween. It's for the 70s, it's amazing cinematography.
Are you dissatisfied with the dialogue or with the with the parts of the story that aren't related to the camera?
No, because it's a movie, so it all flows together. It's very much, it's designed to be told in the visual medium, right? So like, again, this is one of the differences between Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween. Nightmare on Elm Street, I think, could work as a book. And I don't think Halloween could.
Mm-hmm.
I think the storytelling in Nightmare on Elm Street is such that it could be done on the written page with our imaginations and things like that. And Halloween could not. It has to be told through the visual medium of film.
So now I got to confess something to you, Peter.
Yeah.
And of course, as I confess something from my inner soul to you, I'm confessing to anybody else watching us, but we'll pretend not. I looked at half of this in the evening, and then I went back and I watched the whole thing just this afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
And a friend of mine was over. He was doing some work, and he likes to work over here because my room was actually quite bright during the day.
Yeah.
And I was doing work for this episode. But I got to confess, Peter, I told my friend, you know what? I'm not really a big Halloween fan.
Mm.
And I realized something. That's not the way I felt the last time I looked at the movie with said friend. We watched almost all the Halloweens. We skipped a couple of them because they were so stupid. I couldn't.
Right.
I just couldn't handle it.
Right.
But we looked at almost all of them. But I said, I thought to myself after he left, now why did I just say that? Because I really enjoyed it the first time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in the moment, I am more craving story-driven films, because I think it just has something to do with losing the computer over the weekend. I'm just a bit whacked in the head. Hopefully not whacked like Michael Myers is, but but you know, a bit whacked in the head. But now I realize, as you're telling me this, with Halloween, if you're not watching, and then again, just tell me if you agree with this, if you're not watching every little nuance of the camera, you're missing the story.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Whereas with Nightmare on Elm Street, the camera is secondary to the dialogue.
Right. And it's much more stationary. There's much more camera on a tripod, set shots, almost theater work in Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh my God. Speaking of theater work, this is not off topic, but it's going to sound like it. Last night, same friend and I rewatched Bela Lugosi's 1931 Dracula.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it so much. My friend wasn't really into it. So when we review it on here, I'll be interested to see what you think.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least he wasn't into it as much as I was. I loved it so much because I say that the camera can do almost nothing. It's 1931. There's really no sense of a certain visual effect other than lighting on Bela Lugosi's eyes, but it's all about the expressions of the actors. Oh my God. I mean, it just the way he can walk into a scene, and there's an elegance and a mysteriousness to him. The camera's doing almost nothing. It's just like you're a spectator on a play.
Yeah. Well, that's how things were shot back then. I mean, that changed. I'm trying to think with a big change with that. I know Citizen Kane was part of the big change of that. Citizen Kane. The camera was not as mobile as it is now in Citizen Kane because they were so big and heavy. But he did shots that had never been done before, literally set up mechanisms where they like dropped a camera to get the shot and dug holes in the ground to get the low angles they needed. And
Okay, I think we need to review Citizen Kane on here at some point because I've never seen
absolutely.
it. I don't.
Man, the
Yeah.
story's okay. The cinematography is, well, just amazing.
So you would say, just to keep us on the Halloween thing, you would say Halloween is a masterpiece of cinematography? Would you go that far?
Absolutely. For the horror genre, it establishes so much in terms of I mean, the angles that are used, right? So high angles, low angles, shots from perspective of characters. It is of the big three of that era. Sort of, I'm talking Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween. It is the best shot.
I think there's one film you missed, but tell
Yeah.
me if you disagree, and that's Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre didn't ever have like the commercial success that the other three did. But I could see the argument for including it.
Well, the reason that I was including it, maybe we're basing it on different criterion here, criteria rather, is Texas Chainsaw Massacre shifts the horror genre.
It does. It's true.
Like it shift now. And now I hope I've got my timeline right. Texas Chainsaw Massacre comes after Nightmare on Elm Street, right? Or does it come before?
I don't know. Let me look that up real quick.
Okay, Peter's gonna Google. I was hoping Peter had that in his head, by the way, because this listeners, viewers. This is I was hoping that Peter had it in his head so we didn't have to Google during the episode. But you know what? We have to Google during the episode. Life happens.
No, Texas Chainsaw Massacre comes out in 1974.
Okay, so it becomes, that's good to know then. And that's also really interesting because I just said that Texas Chainsaw Massacre shifts the horror genre, but Halloween somehow then doesn't follow that because it's not, excuse my language, but I can't find another word. It's not torture porn.
No.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre, when I watched that, I said, how do I get these 2 hours of my life back? And a friend of mine from Chicago wrote on my Facebook page, because I decided to complain to the internet about it, that it's 70s torture porn. And I was like, yeah, what's the point?
Well, that's part of why I've never watched it.
No, maybe we should watch it so you can you can experience it.
Oh God. But no, I mean, that is so right. So that's actually a really good example of there's because I like horror, but I don't like all horror.
Okay, so, all right.
Right. So I like Halloween. I like Friday the 13th. I like Nightmare on Elm Street. I like these sort of dready, suspenseful, existential horror-y, right? Mild slasher films. Haven't seen Scream. Would probably like Scream. But then you get things like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Saw, like these gore spectacles that I'm just not into.
I loathe Saw. I'm not only not into it, I loathe it. I think it is completely uncreative. I think it is simply watching people getting tortured and slaughtered for 2 hours, and even his "let's play a little game" or whatever the heck he says.
Can we play a game?
Yeah, right. Something like that. That actor, by the way, was in a very good episode of The X-Files, which was a critique of the tobacco industry. So I really liked that actor in the X-Files episode. But oh man, the Saw movies are just, what is the point?
The point is, it's gore, it's torture porn, that's what it is. That is the point.
But that is, I don't see a point for those movies now. I see the point, even though I didn't like it, of Texas Chainsaw Massacre because it introduces more blood into the horror genre in general. I mean, I guess there'd been blood in the 60s, though,
Yeah.
in perhaps in British horror film, but it
Well,
really
there's a
takes
great
that
shot
to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, there's, there is implied blood a lot in the 60s, and there was a lot more blood in black and white films because it's less gory. Interesting fact, they would straight up just use chocolate sauce for blood in black and white films because they didn't have to worry about it being red.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting. And by the way, there is absolutely no blood in the Bela Lugosi Dracula. None.
Fascinating.
So then it would share something in common with Halloween. Although I'm sorry, even when Michael murders his sister, I thought I saw some blood on her but it was so faint. I mean, so very faint. So overall, I agree with you. Maybe my eyes are playing tricks on me, or I don't know. I'll go back and look at it.
I think you want to see
and let you know.
Yeah, so I think you want to see blood because John Carpenter actually talked in an interview about not using any blood.
Okay, then I want to see blood. But I will go back and look at it again and let you know if I can find that faint blood. Have you seen the other Halloweens though?
I've seen Halloween. I think I've seen Halloween 2, but I think that's it.
That's the closest to the first one.
Yeah. Yep.
Of all the sequels, I like that one. And I love Halloween H2O. I just think that is a masterpiece. Because it's all about trauma.
Yeah. I might have seen that one. I'm not sure. Halloween is the one I've seen the most of. I know that.
Have to come back.
That's fine.
How many of the sequels do you think you've seen? Just 2?
I know I've seen Halloween 2. I might have seen H2O.
Oh, let's we'll plan, listeners, to viewers, listeners, whatever we have now. We'll plan to come back and look at Halloween H2O at some point. It's just a masterpiece.
I believe it.
If you agree. If you agree to that, producer, if you will give the director the funding. Metaphor.
Yeah. We were talking about the credits earlier and both the intro and outro sequences. And I think what people miss is there are 3 actors credited for playing Michael Myers. Young Michael age 23, and The Shape.
Yeah, let's talk about The Shape for a second.
Right? So we never see his face. In shots before he gets the masks, it's specifically cut below the neckline. So you don't see his face. And I actually took a look at it. So it's an hour 31-minute movie. And I actually clocked this. We do not see the Michael Myers mask until 48 minutes in. When it comes up in the background, like it's not even like you see him, it's like you gotta be paying attention. You sort of see him peer through a window in the background and then go away.
That's genius, isn't it?
Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
Yes. You're getting giddy the way I get giddy for Nightmare on Elm Street. I think this might be your favorite of the big 3.
Oh, it absolutely is. The visual storytelling is unmatched. I mean, it is as a lover of visual storytelling, right? Like I prefer graphic novels. I love movies. Right, my whole training is in mass media.
And as someone trained in mass media, Halloween is one of your babies for horror movies.
Absolutely. I mean, even beyond horror movies, it's one of my babies. Like I'm like, if even if you don't like horror movies, just for the visual storytelling alone, you should check out Halloween.
Is Halloween really a horror movie?
It's more of a suspense movie.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But let's talk about the shape, because the shape is supposed to be supernatural.
Right. Right. As Tommy says, you can't kill the
through?
boogeyman.
And the dialogue in Halloween is bad anyway, frankly.
Well, it's not great. I don't know if I'd call it bad, but it's not. It's not the point.
Well, that's just my snobbiness with writing coming through, I think, because I mean, Nightmare on Elm Street is a brilliantly written film.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a brilliantly written film. Halloween is a brilliantly filmed film.
Yeah.
Can you say that? Filmed film?
You would normally say it's a brilliantly shot film.
I thought so. I was like, wait a minute, that doesn't. But there's something with that dialogue that well, and like I said, just the cast of the overdubbing that made it for me not as pleasurable of an experience. But when you're saying that Halloween is a visual movie, I wonder what it would be like to watch it with the sound off.
Not great, because the soundtrack's important too. It'd be interesting if you could watch it without dialogue.
Yeah, let's talk. Yeah, how could we even do that?
You'd have to have a re-edit of it. You know, I mean, someone would have to go back to the original master tapes or something. But
okay, so that's not something you or I could do for fun.
No, not really.
Peter's like, please don't make me.
Theoretically, I could download the soundtrack and read
it. No. Okay, got it. But in any case, that is an important question, right? Like, how does one take advantage of the visual medium that movie making is?
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to me, I don't know if you really gave this an explicit critique in our last episode, but it seems to me like you have a critique of Wes Craven, that he didn't really direct cinematography that well.
No, I don't. I think he really didn't take advantage of the opportunities given to him in the visual medium.
Right. And so then my question for John Carpenter is, he takes all the opportunities given to him in the visual medium, but it's not a well-written script.
There's not much script. I mean, it's primarily action. I mean, it's pretty, not like an action movie, but it's primarily things happening, not people talking.
Do you find do you find it scary somehow?
Halloween, I find eerie. I find unsettling.
What's the difference between eerie and scary?
So, like, I don't know that I ever like sort of jumped out of my socks watching Halloween, and but you get this cold shiver down your spine.
Ooh. And the music helps with that too.
Oh, absolutely. Which John Carpenter wrote as well.
Now, are you interested in the newest iterations of Halloween? There've been since 18. Jamie Lee Curtis came back, and they sort of revamped the whole thing as if none of the sequels ever happened.
Yeah, I've been intrigued by that. I just haven't had the time to get around to it.
I saw the 2018 Halloween finally, recently. I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah.
Was John Carpenter was somehow involved in it again.
Oh, good.
So I have a thing. I have a thing. I don't know if you agree with me, but with movies, I gotta. I'm picky about something. I want the original folks involved. Sequels are going to be made.
Right. So you kind of have an auteur theory of filmmaking.
What's that?
Auteur meaning the sort of the author, the how to describe it. Sorry, this is one of those moments where I think in French. That's how I'm trying to
feel free to think in French.
English. It's a cinema theory where the film is sort of the property of the maker.
Yeah, okay. So now I'm a walking contradiction because Jacques Derrida is one of my very favorite philosophers, and he's completely against the authority of the author.
Right.
So I'm a walking contradiction. Can you please free me of this enslavement that I have to the author in films, Peter?
The author is dead, the filmmaker lives.
What happened? Okay, all right. As you take a sip of your water in glee, what if the filmmaker dies?
I mean, that's a really good question, right? So I think at a certain point, some films are really fall into the auteur theory, right? Like, so people have tried to remake some classic French films, and it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And some classic German films too, right? Like, I don't think you could remake The Casket of Dr. Caligari.
I don't know that movie, so we need to put that one on our list of things to review too, because I have no idea what that is.
That's another horror-ish movie, actually. Unsettling German expressionism.
Okay.
It's a silent, I think it's a silent film. And which silent films are told in a totally different way, which makes it really hard to remake some of them. Because
I mean, how would you remake Nosferatu?
Right, exactly.
But okay, you're telling me I have an auteur theory of filmmaking. I would then say I have a structuralist theory of filmmaking. Does that mean that you are a post-structuralist when it comes to films? Are you a Derridian? And I'm a Husserlian or whatever?
I think so. This is really tricky, right? Because on certain level, for certain films, I very much have an auteur theory, right? For indie films, things like that. But then we get into blockbusters. For me, that's a totally different thing.
Is Halloween a blockbuster?
That's a good question. It certainly becomes it. The later movies, right, are more the blockbuster style. It becomes a franchise. But Star Wars is definitely a blockbuster, and Star Wars is definitely a franchise, and the franchise will outlive George Lucas. In many ways, the franchise has outlived George Lucas.
Well, it's completely it's dissociated from George Lucas, isn't it?
Yeah, well, Jon Favreau is currently saving it with his television shows. Oh my gosh, The Mandalorian was so good. Book of Boba Fett so far is so good.
And here, friends, we find out that Peter, in the classic debate of Star Trek versus Star Wars, is a Star Wars nerd.
Oh, absolutely. I was on the forums in the 90s, my friend. I was in the chat rooms fighting for Star Wars. I mean, not that I don't like
I
Star
don't know.
Trek. I like
I
Star
looked
Trek
at,
and I appreciate it, but I love me a good space opera.
I mean, I don't know. I started watching Gene Roddenberry's original Star Trek from the 60s, and there was so much to commend for that. And I don't know, we have to have that debate in another time.
Mhm,
But so what I struggled with for Halloween,
mhm.
okay, because and so I'm going to do something different for Halloween than what I did for Nightmare. For Nightmare, I tried to stay in Nightmare 1, and then I kept talking about New Nightmare because I couldn't help
Yeah.
myself. But I tried to stay in Nightmare 1. For Halloween, I want to address the sequels. The sequels that I could tolerate and even like somehow were the sequels that at least had Donald Pleasance.
Hmm.
After Donald Pleasance died in 1995, which obviously is not his fault, he died.
No.
I was yeah, it's not his fault that Loomis stopped being in them, at least the real Loomis, which is Donald Pleasance. They had somebody else playing Loomis, and I almost gave that person the middle finger, but I didn't. For me, then the only sequels that were bearable were when Jamie Lee Curtis came back,
Mhm.
right? That for me, someone connected to the original had to be there in order for me not to spend 2 hours rolling my eyes, wondering when I would get my 2 hours back.
Right.
After Donald Pleasance died.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know. Is that auteur? That's original cast. That's not auteur.
It's not quite auteur, but it's in the vein of auteur.
Question of, and I felt this sort of with Halloween. Why are these movies getting made? I mean, when Jamie Lee Curtis came back, okay, I can understand that. I'm interested in the Laurie Strode character and how she survives and copes with her trauma. It's an interesting question. But why are they getting made
Money, money,
when she
money,
said she didn't want to do it anymore?
money.
Well, yeah, but that's not okay. But that's not art. You and I are doing this show now with a commitment to art as seen in the film medium.
Mhm.
Well, film, and we'll branch out to other things in the moment, but in the moment we're primarily focused on film. Why should we waste our time with any sequel that isn't involving the artists that gave their time and hard effort to make it?
Well, sometimes there's new stories to be told, right?
Mm.
So like with it's going to be interesting to see what happens. So okay, right. Mandalorian, part of the Star Wars franchise, tells a whole new set of stories. It's incredible. John Favreau is in charge of it. It's very minimally involved. I think George Lucas is very, very minimally involved in it, but it's John Favreau's baby. And it tells these amazing stories. Or the animated Clone Wars series, which is critically acclaimed. These are all great things. Expanding the franchise, bringing it into another generation, carrying on the tradition. Now, if you compare that to, say, right, like, so some people will say that Solo, the Han Solo movie, didn't need to be made. And I haven't watched it yet, so I can't tell you whether or not it needed to be made or not, but there are definitely people who make that argument that it didn't need to be made. George Lucas was not involved. Harrison Ford was not involved. It tells the story of this.
Harrison Ford was not involved in a movie based on his character.
Right, but it's about his character from before the Star Wars movies happened.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Right, so he couldn't play. He's too old to play the character that they wanted to have. This gets into that blockbuster franchise kind of thing, right? So one of the things that they're talking about right now There's a really huge debate in the fan community and even within the filmmaking community. Do you recast T'Challa from Black Panther now that Chadwick Boseman is dead?
Well, no, you don't make it anymore. But unless you want to do prequel movies like you're talking about with Harrison Ford.
Right, but is that character so critical then to the Marvel Cinematic Universe that you need to recast it?
Okay.
How do you continue?
But
there
it
are
was
still Black Panther stories to tell. How do you continue to tell Black Panther stories?
Well, but it was so special that Chad Boseman was cast. I mean, that's
Right,
a really tough question.
It is a really tough question, and it's not one that anyone has an answer to yet. It's one that's being there are petitions on both sides going around the internet right now. And
I'm sure.
You know, and you have to either just recast him and go on as if nothing happened, or you have to kill the character. Right? You can't just.
Sorry.
It's okay, but you have to make it somehow flow into the cinematic universe, and that's the thing that we're getting into that didn't used to happen. They didn't used to have these cinematic universes.
But Halloween is not a cinematic universe, is it?
In its own way, it kind of is. Right? The number of sequels and all that, it's so big that it is in a way its own cinematic universe. And particularly Friday the 13th and the Nightmare on Elm Street series, those are both definitely cinematic universes because they interact with each other.
Yes, but what makes the Nightmare on Elm Street work, except one, which is awful and a something that never should have been done. All of them have Robert Englund. All of them. So even the worst of the Freddy Krueger movies, which I would put somewhere around 6 and 5, are probably the two worst Nightmare movies. They still have him. Even Freddy versus Jason in 2003, which some people don't like, but I do. I saw it in the theater even. It was and I went to it solely because I knew Robert Englund was coming back one last time to put that sweater on, which he joked had gotten rather ripe throughout 7 sequels, to play Freddy Krueger. He was coming back. If he had not been there, in 2003, I wouldn't have seen it. In 2010, I read that they were rebooting Nightmare on Elm Street. I saw Wes Craven was not involved. I was already terribly leery. And I saw that Robert Englund was no longer playing Freddy Krueger, but Robert Englund is a gentleman, and he gave his blessing and support and well wishes to the new Freddy Krueger. And I said, okay, I will try it. I hated every minute of that film. I'm sorry. With all respect to Robert Englund, he may not wish that those of us who love him and his character would feel this way, but with all due respect to him, I hated that remake. I hated that he wasn't in it. If they make another Freddy Krueger movie, I'm sorry, I can't watch it. If he's not doing it, if he wants to come back and play Freddy Krueger one last time, I will be loyally in that theater. I will be one of the first people to buy the ticket as soon as I can get a hold of it. But if they remake that again and he is not there, and now that Wes Craven is dead, it's even worse. There is no Freddy Krueger anymore, period. It's done. You think I'm crazy?
I don't think you're crazy. I think you are intense. Um,
Hey, I'm just being honest. I tried, Peter. I tried. I went to the theater. I saw the Nightmare remake in the theater
yeah,
in 2010 when it first came out. I was in there on opening weekend. Robert Englund has given it his blessing. Okay, I'm going. And I just, oh my God. And then last year, Peter, so what is that now? 11 years later?
yeah.
11 years later, I looked at it again. It was on Netflix. Peter, I hated every minute of that damn movie. Not one thing changed for me in 11 years. I hated it.
Yeah,
So for me, when I don't have the same degree of attachment to Halloween as I do to Nightmare on Elm Street.
yeah.
But when I found out that Jamie Lee Curtis after Halloween 2 said she wasn't going to do it anymore, I said, why is this being made? And Halloween 3 is just insane. I didn't understand that at all. There was no Michael Myers. What's the point? Um, but then Donald Pleasance was in some of those movies, and God, there were times Donald Pleasance is the only thing making those sequels even halfway bearable to watch. And then he dies again, no fault of his own. May he rest in peace. And now I'm going, oh my God, I got to sit through all these, nieces and nephews and whatever other plot developments they're going through, which I just want my time back. And finally, after 4 evenings of suffering through sequels, I get back to Jamie Lee Curtis and I'm going, now this is making music again in Halloween H2O. And then because there's a new clone, which is a very clever way to keep making money, by the way, but really bad for artistry. Now we've got Jamie Lee Curtis being killed in whatever that is, Halloween Resurrection, which is again a movie that should not have been made, and she wanted to get killed off so that she could get out of the obligation to keep doing this. Then we get that movie, and then we get these odd retcons in like 2008, 2009, which are completely divorced from the original story and just weird. And then finally, in 2018, we get something plausible where it's Laurie dealing with her trauma from the first movie. They retcon, or not retcon, they just ignore all the sequels and they go from movie 1 to 40 years later. And they acknowledge, by the way, that Donald Pleasance has died because they say that Loomis is dead. And so that was so well done, I thought. And I wasn't suffering through those movies, through that film. Rather, I haven't seen the newest one that just came out with her because it's not available yet. I didn't suffer through that sequel. I really actually quite liked that sequel. There was continuity for me. I don't know if this makes any sense to you, but this is where I am.
Yeah.
I mean, I think with Robert Englund not being Freddy Krueger is similar to the Halloween. It's just I'm much more firm-headed on that than I am on Halloween. Halloween, I just want my time back. Regarding the sequels, Nightmare on Elm Street, I wish somebody would, the remake, and this won't be me, so nobody worry about it, me actually going and doing this, but I wish somebody would destroy the original masters because that film just never should have been made. What? Why are you shaking your head at me?
It's just it's intense, man. Like, whoa.
I am committed to the visual art, Peter, but I'm not committed to the visual art when it becomes a money-making endeavor of bad written sequels, and yeah.
You should never watch soap operas.
Well, there's a lot of continuity in soap operas. Days of Our Lives, for instance, maintained some of the same cast for 40 years.
Right, but they
till they all died.
But they will recast people, and the show has been going for ever.
Well, yeah, it probably will go forever. But
right? So the
Did you
original
ever
people,
watch?
but the original people involved are not involved at all.
But there's a continuity of storylines somehow.
Okay, so
That's
then there's the
not
argument for
true
Star
for
Wars.
Halloween.
Okay, that might be true. Yeah. But so there's the argument for Star Wars, right? Is that there's a continuity of storyline going through, even though George Lucas isn't as involved anymore.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, for me, I love the trilogy, and I just think nothing else should have been made. And the trilogy's great, and that's kind of where I live. I mean, James Earl Jones is so good with the voice of Vader. Vader is my favorite character, by the way, in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Who's yours?
My favorite character in Star Wars, probably Lando Calrissian.
Who's that?
He's the guy in charge of the Cloud City.
Which Star Wars is that?
That is Empire Strikes Back, and then he also comes back in Return of the Jedi.
Okay,
Although
yeah,
actually, let's be really honest. My real favorite character is Boba Fett.
Of course it is. But notice that your two favorite characters come from the original trilogy. That says something.
Well, that's because that was how I first encountered it, and I don't know. Boba Fett's interesting because a lot of the lore around Boba, there's not a lot of lore about Boba Fett in the original trilogy.
Mm.
All of the Boba Fett lore comes from extra stuff, from books.
Yeah, what do you do with the extra stuff?
Well, that's so Disney has wiped out the extra stuff.
Yeah, like rather like the Catholic Church, they're rather suppressing extra canonical sources, aren't they?
They are, which is I think is good because the extra canonical sources has gotten to be too much. But then they've gone back and said, but we're not just abandoning these characters, right? So now we're getting a TV series where in the first episode we learn how Boba Fett survived the Sarlacc pit. Right. We learn how Boba Fett is becoming who Boba Fett is.
But I have a question for you. Wouldn't you still say that the first trilogy from the 70s is the best?
Oh, yeah.
So might I be on to something here, even though I am so intense about this? Might there be a grain of truth to what I'm saying?
A bit, but I wouldn't say that the rest of it shouldn't have been made.
I don't feel that way about everything. I just feel that way about Nightmare on Elm Street, the reboot, that was just insulting. It was insulting to me as a devoted, loyal fan of Wes Craven and Robert Englund and of that universe. It was just personally insulting to me that they made that movie. That's all.
Okay.
And so I'm showing my displeasure by saying that shouldn't have been made.
Okay. What are we going to do next time?
There's one redeeming.
Oops,
yes. Well, I'll just say that there was one redeeming thing, because you know how I feel about Stephen King movies based on his books.
Yeah.
There's one redeeming thing for me in the new adaptation of It from 2017 and whenever that was. The sequel came out 2019. King appears in the sequel.
Yes,
like
I know.
Like that kind of stuff makes movie adaptations from books totally fine for me. But yeah, at the end of the day, but I do honestly, just to finish up with the Halloween, I do think I don't want somebody to go and destroy the masters, which is what I wish for the Nightmare on Elm Street from 2010, because I was just so personally offended. I don't wish that, but I do wish they hadn't have been filmed. I don't see the point of it. I mean, like you say, money. Well, that's not art. That's capitalism.
Yeah, well.
There's a big difference. Next time, friends, we will be reviewing the original Exorcist.
Yes. I haven't seen that yet. I'm very excited.
Yes, a masterpiece, again with sequels that we're going to ignore. A masterpiece of both. Peter and I will both be happy. A masterpiece, I think, of cinematography.
Yes.
And a masterpiece of dialogue and overall movie theme.
And pea soup.
And pea soup that poor Linda Blair had to vomit at a camera. So until next time, I'm Brach Jennings.
And I'm Peter Clark.
And this is Intercontinental Media.